Here we go. Hey everybody.
All right. Hi everyone.
Sorry. So we're doing something a little bit new today, and so extra long, awkward pause
In the beginning.
at the beginning. So
Not after that, hopefully. We should be on a roll from here.
And it's been a while since we've been in the Virginia room for a virtual tasting. This is nice. This is a good way to kick it back off. Some really nice wines here. So today's focus, we're gonna talk about Burgundy. Burgundy is one of the most for most wine lovers. You're gonna say Burgundy. You don't have to say anything else. Everyone kind of like just mentally taken there and love the wines and all that. We're gonna really talk about Burgundy. We're gonna we have obviously these four beautiful wines that we have here today, but this is definitely one for questions. Ask lots and lots and lots of questions. Ask us anything about the wines in general. So we're actually going to not necessarily go like we're going to talk about these wines super in depth or anything like that. We will talk about the wines, but the big thing is that there's so much to dive in with this region. We actually even thought about breaking this into like a two-part series and just like leave it a big cliffhanger halfway through.
So today we've got four great wines: Chardonnay, Rosé of Gamay, the Coteau Bourguignon Rosé, the Bourgogne Noir, which is Pinot Noir, and then the Pommard, which is also a Pinot Noir. So, and these are all from our Maison Sanglier project, which is based in and around Pommard region in Burgundy, which we'll get into. But like Jeremy said, today is really about, we could all use a little travel, a little escape. So we're going to Burgundy. Ask us any questions that you have about the region, these wines specifically, anything else, and just enjoy the wines along the way, and feel free to dive right in.
Yeah, for sure. Like for some reason you start off with the rosé or something like that, just interject a question and we'll answer. But one of the reasons why we have that awkward pause is because Lacey said, we're gonna take you somewhere. Okay, so we're gonna share some images and videos and things like that for you to really be taken there. And before we do, okay, it's important to understand Burgundy is not just one of these wine growing regions where they make very expensive wines that are collectible and things like that. Fundamentally, when we talk about the history of Burgundy, one, it's very long. They've been growing grapes and making wine here for well over 1,000 years. And one of the most important things happened when there was a point in time where in Burgundy, France, a lot of grapevines were grown. Still, I guess still are, right? And a lot of wine was made, but there was a monopoly held over the region's vineyards by the monastery. So monks, the church, owned all of the vineyard land. And in this process, these monks, diligent note takers, they read, they farmed, they drank wine, and they thoroughly mapped out Burgundy in terms of what are the very best vineyard sites in the world. And really based off of how thorough the mapping was, these same parcels of land are farmed today and recognized for their individual unique characteristics because of the diligence that these monks did. And this was hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And that has carried through now to the point where they recognize certain vineyard sites, regardless of what you planted there, produced a superior crop. And then over time, really embrace these differences where you take the same basic ingredient. Most of the time in Burgundy, it's Pinot Noir, okay? It's amazing that you can have these two adjacent villages producing Pinot Noir, but even within a particular village, where you are on a hill, you can have adjacent vineyards that produce very different wines. The same actual varietal or ingredient in both of these two villages or both of these two vineyard sites producing uniquely different wines. And even though the wines are made very differently, the basic idea is that the uniqueness of those individual villages and or vineyard sites result in a unique growing environment for the vine, producing a crop that is distinct, that then makes a wine distinctive as well. Thus, a wine reflects its place most importantly. Pinot Noir or Chardonnay or Gamay are merely the vessel through which it is speaking. And so, the French are very famous for this notion of terroir, that a wine is a representation of its place, this confluence of variables that really are the uniqueness of that place, the soils, the elevation, the prevailing weather patterns, the temperatures, the native yeast that are in that vineyard. And Burgundy, right, is not just one of these places that produces very great wines, but most importantly, it is the true embodiment of fine wine, of terroir, of a wine that speaks of a place. And when you think about the mission here at Stone Tower Winery, from the very beginning when the Huber started this project, it was produce world-class wines. It wasn't that, period. It was produced world-class wines from Virginia and from this unique parcel of land that we have just outside of Leesburg, Virginia, on Hogback Mountain. We have a unique terroir here as well. And so Burgundy inspires us very greatly, okay? And I think that's important to understand about Burgundy first and foremost. Forget about everything else that we're about to show you, even though it's really cool and all that sort of stuff, is that it really embodies this idea of your vineyard site and your location, the variables around it are the most important thing for determining the resulting quality and style of the wine. So without much further ado, where are we? So we're getting fancy here. Hopefully I scroll the right one. All right. So we're in France. So the lower image you have here is obviously France. Okay. And you notice how there's a little breakaway here of these 4 sections. Okay. Is right here. So Burgundy is kind of northeast central of France, or northeast central part of France. You notice that Lyon, it's kind of right in between. If you're drawing a straight line from Paris to Lyon, it's kind of almost right in between, a little bit closer to Lyon. So it's based off of this, it's a relatively cool growing environment. So remember, just outside of Paris is Champagne. In fact, while with climate change, they can make some still wine that's pretty decent. They're very known for their sparkling wine. And that's about really what they're known for because it's such a cool climate. So just a little bit further south is where Burgundy is located. And so Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are the dominant grapes all throughout the region. It's kind of broken up into 5 different subregions, which you see here. Okay, so in this sort of golden color, we have Chablis, very famous for Chardonnay. With this being at the northern tip, this is actually closer to the vineyard region of Champagne than it is to the rest of these other 4 Burgundy regions that you see here. So with Chablis, it's pretty much all Chardonnay, there's a couple of the smaller appellations technically around there where there is a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc, a little Pinot Noir, but really Chardonnay territory up here. But really the heart of Burgundy are these next 2 subregions. Right south of Dijon, where great mustard is made, okay? You have the Côte de Nuits, okay? And then right south of that, you have the Côte de Beaune. Both of these collectively are, they are known as the Côte d'Or, or the Golden Slope. Some people believe that it is shortened from Côte d'Orient, or the east-facing slope, Golden Slope. It's really essentially a northeast to southwest ridgeline that kind of just runs that angle, and pretty much all the vineyards are located on the eastern and southern exposures that you have here along this ridgeline. But those 2 regions are the most famous. Now, when we talk about Burgundy, as we always say, if the wine's red, it's almost always Pinot Noir. If it's white, it's almost always Chardonnay. Well, Côte de Nuits is almost always red wine, and it is almost always Pinot Noir. Côte de Nuits, Pinot Noir, Nuit Noir, okay? That's how you can remember that. Some of your most expensive wines in the world are from here. So Domaine de la Romagné Conti is based out of here. I mean, if you can find these wines, they're thousands of dollars a bottle upon release. But where we're going today is to the Côte de Beaune. Before we get there, we'll give a quick nod here to the Côte Chalonnaise, the Mécanais. Very, very beautiful wines produced here. There is some Pinot Noir through here, okay, especially in the Côte Chalonnaise. But by and large, you can find some incredible Chardonnays produced through here, and Chardonnays that generally don't cost nearly what they would if you found them in the Côte de Beaune. All right, now we're going to dive into the Côte de Beaune here. Ooh, this is going to be a little bit tougher here. You know what? we have a video that will take you a little bit deeper in here.
Let's do that.
So what we're gonna do, the reason why we're gonna go into the Côte de Beaune here is because the village of Pomar that Lacey was referencing is located here. And maybe you could say this is cheating because we're going to show you a video within a video that you're already watching. But look, we want to take you there. And there's this beautiful video that's really what it's going to do. Okay. And we'll jump back here real quick. Essentially, this video is going to take you from the very southern end of the Côte de Beaune, right where it kind of meets the Côte Chalonnaise. And it's going to fly you up all the way up to the northern end of the Côte de Beaune, where the beautiful, beautiful historic town of Beaune is located, okay? And our vineyards are kind of right in the northern third, you know, you went 2/3 of the way up, and you'll see that. So just to kind of orient yourself on the video, because it's kind of, it's a video, it seems like drone footage. It's taking you functionally from south to north, okay? So we'll do that. You may need to adjust your volume a little bit.
Separated from the Côte Chalonnaise by the valley of the Don, the Côte de Beaune comes as a prolongation of the Couchois. In the south, it starts with the appellations of Morange and Santenay, both of which are mainly planted with Pinot Noir. We then come.
All right, sorry, Lacey hates me because I'm like a, you know, I would be great in like professional sports. Like I just like take the video, go back and forth.
You gotta do the replay here.
In the south,
I just wanted to come here since our map didn't really work out. So again, if you look at the compass here, pretty much the right side of your screen, for all intents and purposes, north. The left side is west. And so again, working from south to north, the video is going to take you this way. I guess it's more like pretty much like, yeah. And then we're gonna be right here where it says Pomar. Okay, so kind of confusing, but
starts with the appellations of Morange and Santenay, both of which are mainly planted with Pinot Noir. We then come to the area of the Great Whites, from Chassagne-Montrachet to the south to Meursault in the north, where Chardonnay produces wines of great depth with incomparable aromatic qualities. The soil here is more limestone, giving rise to wines of great precision and elegance that are appreciated the world over. Continuing towards Beaune, Pinot Noir once again begins to dominate, covering the slopes of transversal valleys formed by the rivers. The valley of the Vendaine in Pomar, south of Beaune, and
so just to orient yourself, there's two different major kind of valleys that are kind of coming together here in the town of Pomar. I believe that that last shot was from down here, looking up to here, and now we're kind of in that valley looking back towards the town.
the Rhône Valley in Savigny-les-Beaunes to the north. The historic capital of the Bourgogne wine trade, Beaune is home to the Hôtel Dieu, an architectural masterpiece from the 15th century. Beaune is one of the largest appellations on the Côte. The city hosts a world-renowned wine auction on the third Sunday in November. The Côte de Beaune culminates with the sublime hill of Courton. Capped with forest, it stands out from the line of the escarpment like a peninsula. Apart from its northern side, its slopes are covered with vines. This is where the wines of Courton Charlemagne and the Courton Grand Cru grow. To the west, the Côte de Beaune is hemmed by a wine region at a higher elevation, the Haute Côte de Beaune, where vines alternate with prairies and forest, flourishing on the land that is most favorable.
All right, and just to show you a couple other like cool photos that we have here. I guess, yeah, well, we can talk about it. So this is one shot of like the town, you know, getting a, I like this photo because you get to see this nice sort of slope going up here. All right. And then here again, I mean, this is either sunrise or sunset. I guess this would probably be sunrise. Anyways, again, kind of getting to see the valley and the slope here. The town's right down here, you know, sort of top left part of your screen. And then here's just an aerial shot of the town. And just notice vines just carpeted all around.
It's really incredible. The landscape there is just, I mean, it's just chock full of these vineyards that have been cultivated there for such a long time. And this comes, a good point to answer. Sherry was asking the question of how much property does Stone Tower have in Burgundy? And it's kind of fascinating how these vines are, and the different vineyard blocks are designated, the ownership and whatnot. So, when you're looking at what seems like one continuous block of vines there, that may have several different owners. So we own, it's different pieces pieced together. So there's some, there's some vineyard blocks where we'll own maybe like 3 vines, or not 3 vines, but 3 rows within that, and then larger parcels and whatnot. So it's all pieced together in this in this kind of way that you can tell it's been passed down generations and generations, and repieced together with, when you have a few sons, you gotta parse it out that way, and then so those designations of ownership are very interesting.
Yeah, and so that hyper fragmentation of vineyard ownership that Lacey's describing that was a statutory thing for a little while. So as we mentioned before, when the church had this monopoly over all of the vineyards of Burgundy, what we got out of it was this very thorough mapping, right? So you see this, you can see like these were the parcels. Again, are these the exact parcels amongst that? Of course not, but by and large, they form the underlying sort of foundational knowledge upon which the AOC and the appellation system and these individual vineyard sites were mapped out. But when the sort of monopoly of the church was broken up, and specifically it was the Napoleonic Code in some date that I can't remember, essentially required that when the ownership of land, like it needed to be equally divided amongst sort of the children of the domain or of the estate. And so obviously once you kind of carry that through a few generations or a few deaths back in the day, you get this really fragmented thing. And so that's still very much plays through today, because yes, you have these generational families that continue to farm, but you inevitably, it's very hard to it's not easy to buy vineyard land there. So the fact that the Hubers were able to kind of have this opportunity towards the end of 2016, it's truly amazing. There's a really great book written by an American, Ray Walker. It's called The Road to Burgundy, I believe. Wonderful, wonderful read. But it's essentially about, an American's attempt to try to buy high quality vineyard land in Burgundy. And it doesn't matter whether or not you want to buy vineyard land and I want to make Burgundy. You were thoroughly vetted, I mean, there may be the same amount of vetting that goes into selecting the vice president to some degree, right? Especially if you're an American, right? Because there's this history and culture, and you're talking about people's familial traditions sometimes. If you're talking about, somebody who's inherited vineyard land, it's like 5th generation, and it's like this unique vine, I used to be out there. So really, really cool. And this is just one village. And it's important to understand that if we were driving just within the Côte de Beaune, it would probably only take us about 45 minutes or so to drive that from north to south if we were taking our time on the roads to the towns and stuff like that. It is an incredibly small area, incredibly small. Same thing with the Côte de Nuit. So you could really drive from north to south, Côte de Nuit, Côte de Beaune, and it's the greatest vineyards in the entire world, and it wouldn't take you but 2 hours to do. I mean, it would take me a lot longer because I would just be going back and forth. So, there was Chris, to answer your question about Chateau du Pape in one of these areas, it is not, but it would be almost, well, I guess here, why not? We got the maps here, kind of. There's better maps. So, Chris, if you look at kind of where Lyon is, if you drove due south from Lyon, or just about due south, right, you would come into the Rhone Valley wine growing region. Essentially, it's right here, and it's kind of divided into the northern Rhone and then the southern Rhone. Okay, so and Chateau du Pape will be located in the southern Rhone, kind of right in the heart of it. So it would be somewhere in between the French Riviera and Lyon, I believe, somewhere like right around there. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor. Oh, you can see my cursor.
Yeah,
How about that? Yeah, so that's about where Chateauneuf du Pape is.
Mhm.
Okay,
Which those are some of my favorite wines too.
especially after yesterday's
Mhm.
blind tasting class.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we made a believer out of all of us. So,
Mhm.
and Carmen, we're gonna work on a road trip over
That'll
there.
be a good time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is the precursor to it, you know.
Mhm. Yeah. For now, we just gotta travel through the screen and through the bottle, but
Yeah.
we'll get there.
Yeah, and so now, I mean, look, I think that's a great foundation to just kind of picturing where you are, and I think that to me that's one of my favorite things about wine is that, you know, I taste any of these wines. I'm taken back to the one time I was able to visit there, and it was phenomenal, and it was really beautiful, and with these 4 bottles that we have, I think just a great representation of what all of Burgundy can offer. But as we talked about, these specifically are from the vines that we own in and around that village we just showed you. But one thing that we need to kind of talk about before we pivot out is that there's a very, very rigid classification system of the wines in Burgundy, okay? Best way to think about it is kind of a quality pyramid. At the very base, okay, you have what they call regional wines. Technically, the first 3 wines you taste are classified at the regional level. So when you see Coteau Bourguignon on a bottle of wine, that's really a wine that meets certain requirements that theoretically can be sourced from fruit anywhere throughout the Burgundy region that you saw. Essentially on a map, they've sort of drawn this up, and what in order to put that label, there's a geographic restriction amongst other things that's on there. Okay, moving a step up from that, and that represents a vast majority of the wines. I think it's right around almost 2/3 of all the wine produced in Burgundy is produced under this regional AOC appellation or designation, whatever you want to call it. Moving a step up from there, you have your village level wines. So technically our Pommard would fall under that. Okay, about 30% more or less of these wines are produced in that. And again, there are certain, we'll draw this example in a second. Moving up from that, the last 2 rungs of the quality pyramid, the next step up from village would be Premier Cru. Sometimes you see this as a 1ER, CRU. That is a single vineyard site of high pedigree. Like it's a first growth vineyard site, very high quality, okay? Step up from there is gonna be your Grand Cru vineyard sites, your great growth vineyard sites. This really represents about 1 to 2% of all wine produced in Burgundy. Very, very small amounts. Now, what's very interesting though is that despite what can go onto those different labels, like these 4 wines are all sourced from very small patches of land throughout the area. So, for instance, in the village of Pommard, to put Pommard on the label like we did with this very last wine, we have that in our 4th glass here. Maybe we'll eventually talk about it today. Maybe somebody has some questions. But essentially with that, you know, that wine, when you see Pommard on the label of a bottle of wine, that wine has to be red and it has to be Pinot Noir. Now that's not the case with all villages in Burgundy, but for Pommard it is. So, well, we own Chardonnay vines in Pommard. Well, we can't label this Chardonnay that we produce from the vines in and around the village of Pommard as Pommard, right? We have to say it is a Bourguignon Blanc, or Bourgogne Blanc, okay? It's a white wine because the appellation says that you can't do that. And so with the rosé, it's the same exact thing. Honestly, even if we produced a red wine, okay, from here, this wine couldn't be labeled that way because it's produced, a vast majority of it is Gamay, right? Another red grape varietal. And you can literally, you know, from, you know, with the Pommard, I mean, you literally, these vines can be very adjacent to one another. You can just begin to sort of march up the hill and you go from vines that are classified as sort of regional. You begin walking a little bit further up the slope and then you're in sort of village level territory. Then you walk up a little bit higher up the hill. Well, now you're in probably a Premier Cru vineyard. Maybe if it's a really great sweet spot, it's a Grand Cru vineyard site. And then when you get to the top of the hill, okay, then it generally reverts back to Premier Cru or village level. And so, you know, that slope, all those slopes that you saw, essentially what you have going on beneath the soil is as you get down to the flatter land in Burgundy, there's more clay in the soils, produces heavier, kind of fruitier, softer wines. As you get more to the top of the slopes, okay, you have more limestone-based soils. This gives great nerve and minerality and acidity to the wines, very age-worthy. Your very best vineyard sites are where they meet, okay, and a great sort of reflection of that is they call that sweet spot there in the center back when the monks were doing this, the Cuvée du Pape. You know, it was the wine of the popes because it was so good. And then this stuff up top was the Premier Cru vineyards were considered Cuvée des Cardinal, like for the Cardinals. Again, my French is terrible. And then once you're when you're in the more clay-based soils, that was the stuff that the monks got to drink, Cuvée des Moines. You know, so that was kind of the idea. So yeah. So that appellation system and the hierarchy is very interesting, which means generally when you have wines like this that the reason why I bring that up is because our wines kind of, in my opinion, have that quality pyramid is a good rule of thumb for quality, but the quality-minded wine shopper can find a lot of relative values in the Burgundy wine market when you go down the rung, but find a producer who is coming from small. There's some big asterisks or 3 asterisks associated for why that's not ranked a little bit higher. And a lot of that boils down to bureaucracy and what the official law is, and lines need to be drawn at some point. So yeah, so that's kind of it. That's all I got for now.
All right,
But I mean, we can talk about the wines, I guess. I don't know.
we sure can. Yeah. So it's funny. Jeremy has all of the history and the he likes the laws of wine, where I just really love to drink wine. It's my favorite part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I have just always loved wines from Burgundy. And it's just, as you've seen, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful place. And it's one of those places where it just has a magical quality about it. And there's something about, and I guess that comes down to the terroir. It's the soils, but then it's the climate and just the human touch behind it as well. And it's fun. So my parents went out when the first year that we harvested, and we have that's some pictures I should have brought up. Oh no, now I'm masked because I just have to explain it. But there's pictures of my mom with these those really tiny little trucks that they drive in Europe, because you can see those roads and everything going through Burgundy. You can see how just small they are. So it's one of those three-wheeled little trucks all filled up with grapes in the back. And it was DRC is just a few vineyards over, and they were picking up. And so she has this this cluster of grapes that, if you think about the cost of what that cluster of grapes is, it would be hundreds of dollars. Just about.
Oh yeah,
so,
at least I guess how much a cluster of grapes to a bottle of wine.
It's about a vine per bottle-ish.
Probably.
So
so a cluster probably would be you're probably about right.
A couple hundo.
Easy.
Yeah. So yeah, just a magical place all around. But yes, so
sorry,
these
responding to a comment.
These wines here are really just a great representation of Burgundy as a whole, but then obviously our project there. And we can speak to all of them, but I always like to talk about our rosé because it is kind of an outlier. You don't really find these rosés. It's a blend of Gamay and Pinot Noir. And Gamay is just such a delicious grape, and it's really, to see it done in a rosé in this style, where it's barrel fermented and aged and everything it's really just fun, and a departure from anything that I generally have. Yeah,
for sure. And it's a great point talking about what stylistic, what the wines taste like. And I think at the very least, when we're talking about Burgundy's kind of a cooler wine growing region, none of these things are these overtly fruity wines. All of them are very aromatic wines, which is really great. medium bodied, to medium plus body depending on the vintage, which means that alcohol is pretty moderate. The acidity is very refreshing. But the big thing is, when we think about like Burgundy, I mean, the cuisine, I mean, not only these wines are built for food. I mean, you can absolutely enjoy them on their own, but the cuisine of Burgundy, not only is it delicious, and there are some very nice restaurants there, okay? But what's interesting is that it's very humble cuisine, okay? Like when you think about like beef bourguignon, I mean, it is literally like you take a full bottle of wine, you got your mirepoix, some other stuff in there, you get like a tougher cut of meat that requires a lot of time, and you just like slow cook the heck out of that thing, and it doesn't cost that much to make, and it'll last for a while. And there's a slew of these just like super classic dishes in Burgundy that you can cook at home, and they're so hard to mess up, and there's just brilliant recipes online. Like I still remember, because the important thing to remember is that it's very like the cuisine of Burgundy it's very like it feels like it's just comfort food in many ways. It's very delicious. It doesn't cost a lot to make. But the thing is too is that it doesn't overwhelm the wines. So for instance, Sarah, our colleague Sarah, shared a I forget what the occasion was. It was a 1968 red Burgundy. It specifically was by the Remoisennet family, premier cru of Chêne and Volnay. So it's a town just south of Pomard, right near our town, and because we own the town. No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, like it's very important when you have a really, really special bottle of wine, you don't want to like have some sort of like super ritzy, very complicated dish. Drink the wine. Drink something before you have it too, so that way you really produce a little bit of something like a glass of sparkling or like a cocktail or a beer, and then go into the main show, because at the end of the day, you don't want anything that is like too over the top. And so what, and I think that's just like is simplicity. Burgundy is very simple. The wines are just like, you don't have to be some sort of expert to appreciate it, right? Like all of this, to your point, they say like, you don't need to worry about all these laws and all that sort of stuff. I obviously have a tendency to do that, but at the end of the day, these wines are everything that wine should be. They do represent all of the sort of theological, philosophical, romantic notions of wine, but also at the very just end of the day, if you need a special occasion wine, Burgundy is a great way to go. If you need a wine that just, you need a go-to wine to just enjoy with a simple meal or a complex meal, Sunday evening meal, you can do it. The wine, like these wines are probably, and especially this flight, I think just a beautiful representation of just what wine should be in general. And again, I think that's why you see so many people flock to Burgundy as they learn more. And it's just such a shame because you can find wines. I'm sitting here talking about how, I let off with some of the most expensive bottles of wine in the world. Some of the least expensive bottles of wine, like you can get really delicious wines, at the lower end of the price range. But it's a very if you don't know about Burgundy, it's a very complicated wine growing region to go out and buy. And I think unfortunately you have like capitalist interests can kind of sometimes get in the way of that as well. But so yes,
absolutely. No, I think that. Yeah, I think that really sums it up. And what's interesting to me is that, these are very different wines, obviously, but they all have this unifying characteristic to me of like, it's just, they are full of fruit, but then it's this mineral kind of characteristic, and that just, it comes throughout for all of these for me. And it's just this really lovely, subtle, unifying factor for sure.
And Mark, it is a good point. We should talk about the cheeses
I'm glad
before.
Jeremy just pulled up his cheese cheat sheet,
Yeah.
which is very, very important because I actually had, because this is our second week of doing our cheeses and these wines. So I enjoyed those last Friday, and these cheeses were delicious. So I can't blame you for like having to stop yourself before finishing them all. That's for sure.
Yeah, so I guess I'll give these names a shot. Yeah. All right. So, anyways, we'll start from there is kind of an order in which you should taste the cheeses with the wines and everything like that. Like always, it's great to kind of taste the wines individually, taste the cheeses individually, and then let's kind of like try to pair them as well. But if you're doing this in order, again, if you were tasting the wines, you should taste the white wine, then the rosé, then the Bourgogne Rouge, right? And then the Pommard, okay? And then the order of the cheeses, right? With the Chardonnay, generally speaking, the Brie-esque looking cheese would go brilliantly, really with any of the wines, but especially the Chardonnay, especially the Bourgogne Blanc, and specifically the Brillet Savarin. It was a cow milk cheese from Normandy. So all of the cheeses are from France, not necessarily from Burgundy. Okay, and just I mean, a lot of butter fat in this. It's a triple cream brie, and a lot of butter fat in there. And so that sort of buttery, fatty, just enjoyable texture. And the idea between the Chardonnays, with it being barrel aged, kind of mimics the texture.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it has this, so that cheese really has these lovely savory characteristics that come through that bring that out in the Chardonnay. That it's just, yeah, it's like a creamy, rich, but earthy pairing there. Delicious.
Yeah. For sure. The next cheese, and we featured this the other night, okay, is best way to describe this one is going to be the one that kind of looks like, because we don't have them in front of us, which is kind of a bummer. But Friday evening, we had this cheese on the plate. It was the Ossau Iraty. So it's OSSAU space IRATY. I'm sorry, I should be able to be better at this. It's kind of part of my job. But obviously it's enough to just keep up with wine in general. This would go, honestly, when I tasted this cheese, again, it would go really well with the Bourgogne Blanc, but again, really a great pairing with the rosé that you have here. It's a sheep-based cheese, so sheep milk. Comes from Aquitaine region of France, so that's really kind of southwest France. It's kind of like where Bordeaux is, etc. It's a bigger, Aquitaine is a bigger department than just like state's probably not the right word, but like kind of province. I don't know.
Yeah, region.
And so here, what's cool is that when I tasted this cheese the other day, I thought what was interesting was like it kind of looks as though it's going to be a little bit firmer of a cheese, like that kind of the Loxley Gouda that we did. I was kind of expecting that, but I was amazed when I bit into it. It was almost like Port Salut in terms of the texture. You know what I mean? Where it was like it was very pillowy and just soft, but then kind of had this it still had this like acidic spark to it as well. So I thought it was just a really unique cheese texturally and taste wise. I never really had anything like it. It was almost as though like a couple other cheeses I had can kind of combine into that. And when I did, I wasn't tasting it with the wine, and so that's kind of why thinking it'd be great, with that rosé.
Absolutely.
So I'm a little upset Chef didn't build us a plate, but
Yeah.
guess he's working and we're sitting here drinking wine. So thanks, Chef.
Slinging pizzas.
That's it.
But the next cheese, this is probably my favorite of the bunch. Was this Boucheron goat cheese from the Loire Valley?
That's probably the one that I could have done like relatively, like from a pronunciation standpoint.
Okay, yeah, that's right. That's right. Stuck in there for that one. But yeah, so this kind of goat cheese really has, coming back to a nice acidity factor. It's creamy, but it still has those bright and refreshing notes to it. Which, I mean, honestly, again, when you talk about pairings, especially with cheeses and wines, there's some things that go better together than others, but honestly, any of these cheeses and any of these wines are going to be a delicious treat, but really lovely, especially with that first Pinot Noir, the Bourgogne Blanc, or Noir, this one right here, because it matches in that same textural kind of note there.
Yeah, pretty cool. And then the so there's 5 cheeses on there. I didn't realize that.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
How about that? So moving along. So now we're getting into there's a Comte on there. So it's probably the cheese that looks most firm and feels most firm. Again, this kind of would probably look the color of like a Gouda as well on your plate. Not quite Parmesan, again, because it's not aged nearly as long. But Comps is not necessarily an uncommon cheese. It's a very, very famous cheese, to be honest. And it's from, really as you're working into what I guess it's kind of the foothills of the French Alps, really is kind of like where it's an Alpine cheese. And so it's cow-based milk, unpasteurized. A couple of these cheeses are, I guess probably most of these are unpasteurized, just so everyone knows. But I mean, most cheese in France, the idea is that, pasteurization is an important thing to do. But if you have all the proper protocols in place using high quality things, not pasteurizing means that there's more indigenous native bacterial organisms and things like that that are all present. So that's how you can kind of like really reinforce the terroir of a cheese, like what the cows ate and where it's aging in this cave, wherever, Anyway, so
when you explain it that way, it sounds pretty scary, but it's actually fine.
I mean, they wouldn't.
It just makes it more delicious.
Yeah, I guess that's the point. Yeah, I mean, not meant to scare anybody, but the idea would be is you have this with a little alcohol and a little acidity. Anything that shouldn't be living there, it's all done.
You're good. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll save an anecdote for. Later. Anyways, but comp's really cool. Comp, with the basically essentially the cow's diet, being in an alpine area, it's going to impact the taste of the cheese. This cheese is aged a little bit longer as well. And again, a couple things that's going to happen here. The big thing is that when we age cheese, as we've talked about before, it's going to lose water content. And as it loses water content, the salt, the fat are going to become more concentrated. So maybe we lose some of that if you really enjoy that super soft texture of like that triple cream brie-like cheese that we had to start off with, right? You're going to gain in just fattiness, saltiness, and a complexity of flavor and aroma, not unlike when you age wine for longer, but specifically generally cheeses that you age a little bit longer, you're going to get like a nuttiness to them, which is really nice. So really with this comp, definitely red wine territory here, but especially the Pommard would be a great pairing with that. Believe it or not, as much as we eat cheese when we drink wine, red wine, generally speaking, with tannins and the fruitiness can sometimes be a difficult match for certain cheeses. So actually, generally speaking, white wines, by and large, a safer bet most of the time, but Burgundy in general, because Pinot Noir doesn't have a lot of tannin. And it's very earthy flavor profile, not excessively fruity. Really, really great cheese wines, to be honest with you. And then the last one is it's probably the one that kind of has a little bit of blue cheese tinge to it. Okay, this one is called Forum d'Ambert. It is a cow-based cheese from Auvergne. I know where Auvergne is. Where is that?
It's in France.
yeah, it is. It is. That's true. I'm gonna Google it real quick because I know a winery. See, this is why it's really tricky because, gosh, I feel like it's south. I'm all right. I'm gonna check. I'll check. Did you get the taste?
I did. Yes. No. And that one. So that's kind of your wild card cheese, I would say. Because people really have either. Most often, I find either total love for blue cheese or it does not work for them. For myself, I love it, and especially this one, I found to be relatively mild. But also not, it definitely has that very just classic blue cheese flavor to it, which really kind of comes back to what I was talking to before in terms of this earthy mineral note that really pervades all of these wines for me. And it kind of is just this old world Burgundy terroir. I think that, your best examples will generally always have this richness isn't the right word, but it's just this very visceral, earthy note to them. And the blue cheese is a great pairing to really bring that out and accentuate that note to any of these wines, specifically more in this kind of red wine camp here. Mhm.
True. And Auvergne is southern part of France.
Okay.
They
Good
call
job.
it in the Southern Alps, but like it's really it's about 2.5 hours west of Lyon.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Mhm.
yeah, so that's where that fifth cheese is from, and yeah, I'm a little bummed I didn't get to taste the cheese. I'm glad you did. That's important. I don't know how I was going to talk about them.
Yeah.
So thanks. I mean,
No, you got it. No.
Team-
Jesus.
teamwork.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes we got to drink wine and eat food to make sure that we can do our
It's
jobs
true.
jobs
No, that
halfway
is-
well. Yeah.
You know, these tastings are still super fun for us, but yeah, no, we have to work on the weekends now,
Mhm.
which is also nice and actually amazing to have folks back out here. But it's not all eating cheese and drinking wine for us anymore. That ship has sailed, but that's all right. We can enjoy a little bit of it on our Sunday afternoons with you all. So
And yeah, it is exciting. Next weekend, you know, we open up the exterior of the Harvest Barn.
Mhm.
You know, we're accepting reservations. You know, we do anticipate with how limited the seatings are without a reservation on the weekends, it would be tough. We're going to be keeping the Tower View tasting room very similar to the way it's operating
Mhm.
right now. Okay, wine club members only and your guests reservation, really borderline essential as well. And yeah, so we're very excited to do that. So if we're rolling into Father's Day week, and hopefully we'll be able to make a few more seats available for the dads out there.
Mhm.
This last wine is very delicious. So I mean, I think reality is, you know, we're not talking about the wines too much here as well, because we've
Mhm.
talked about the Bourgogne Blanc a lot in the past. If you have specific questions, please don't hesitate to let us know. We've done the rosé a lot of times too. But this Pommard, this is actually, I tasted this wine. This is 2017 Pommard, 100% Pinot Noir, aged about 18 months in French oak barrels.
Mhm.
All native fermentation on these wines, meaning yeast that were just naturally present there. But this wine, I mean, if you want to know why people love Burgundy so much, I mean, this wine is a spot on representation. You know, we have this blind tasting class going on right now. This wine would be, bam, that is high quality Pinot Noir from Burgundy, France. You know what I mean? I think this wine for me, drank a lot of Burgundy. Especially thanks to Sarah out here. Sarah loves Burgundy. She loves
She's the
opening
queen
them.
of Burgundy.
Yeah, she
for
loves
sure.
opening them with us. This wine for sure drinks at a Premier Cru level. I think it's just beautiful. It's complex. And the thing I love about it though is that sometimes, you know, wines from Western Europe and especially from Burgundy, you know, they can sometimes get funky, right? Like real
Mhm.
funky, you know, meaning that, you know, well, funky just means a lot of different things. But sometimes you can lose the fruit quality. And I don't necessarily need wine that is excessively fruity, but wine is made from fruit. And I like to just at least know that or be reminded of that when I drink the wine. This one has that, but it has all of the sort of earthy, and again, the wine's also relatively young. I mean, from
Mhm.
again, I think this is a high quality Pinot Noir from Burgundy. This definitely has some legs on it to kind of go for a little while in bottle if you're taking care of it. But the wine structurally has great acidity, but it kind of does still have this nice sort of mellow mouthfeel as well, where it does kind of coat your mouth. Long finish on it, very aromatic, just classic great bottle red Burgundy. And I'm so excited that we're actually offering it now. So it's live on the website now as well. And you know, again, Burgundy is not, you know, it's definitely not the least expensive wine that we have on there. But I will tell you that, you know, with this drinking at a Premier Cru level, I mean, I think the wine still definitely falls into that relative value price point for sure. And just gorgeous wine.
Mhm.
It's just delicious.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a fun lineup overall. It's been such a fun project for us all to work on. And yeah, always exciting to have the wines arrive here and here to enjoy.
That's it.
Mhm.
That's it. You have anything to add?
I would love, we welcome, of course,
Yeah.
any other questions that you all may have. But otherwise, I've really just enjoyed this little trip to France
We
we
really
took
did.
here this weekend.
We really did
Yeah.
travel. We really did travel. Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think that's fun. So look, like So what I'll do is I'll share the screen one more time just because, to lose the functionality would just be crazy. But like the thing I love about, where'd our picture go? All right, well, we got one still up. But essentially the thing I love about wine, like when I first got into wine, what I would do is I'd have like my series of wine books, the great reference books. And whenever I had a wine, I'd always try to drink wine from lots of different places, ones I hadn't had before. And I would open that bottle of wine and I'd go and I'd read about that place. And I would look at the pictures of it and I would read the history of that region. And for me, it's like that, like, I think that's super important, right? It's, if somebody drinks a bottle of Virginia wine, well, what's the story about Virginia wine? You know what I mean? Like, I want to know about, like, how did it get there? Now, again, obviously, I ended up making this a career, something I was like modestly interested in, into a career. And so, but I think it's just one of those things where it's just such a cool, such an interdisciplinary subject, and just what it represents culturally, nationally for the countries that produce it. It's just so cool. Science and history and politics and everything that you want, and I just think that's cool. So. So Sherry asked a question about the rules in terms of aging wine. Wow. I have a handy dandy app that'll tell me very, very quickly. I know there's like minimum requirements for like alcohol, varietal. I don't know that it requires you to specify a vessel. I mean, I could be wrong. That's why I'm very intrigued to check that out.
That's a great question. I can just answer simply to talk about the wines that we have in front of us, and those were all barrel aged. So I know in oak, French oak. So I know that for sure.
So there are the wine obviously needs to be Pinot Noir based. There's a minimum alcohol level that needs to be met. There's a maximum on the residual sugar that can be left in the wine. There is an aging requirement, but it does not specify the kind of vessel. So wines must be aged until at least June 15th of the year following harvest. So essentially, that generally means that the wine needs to have been aged at least about 7 months most of the time, because normally harvest is like September-ish, plus or minus a little bit, depending on the year. So not necessarily too, it's not like this wine needs aged for like 3 years in the barrel or anything like that. But what's really interesting is they go on to say the minimum density for planting, because generally in your Western European regions, especially in more temperate places like Burgundy, like Bordeaux, like Champagne, vine density as that increases generally correlates with an increase in quality for a variety of reasons. And so they actually specify the minimum density with which a Pommard could be produced. But then they also will make sure that you're not making too much wine. So they have regulations on the maximum yield, the actual amount of wine that you can make from a particular surface area. Okay, because they want to make sure that you're not overloading the crop, asking a vine to produce beyond what it could do from a quality standpoint, and also making sure you're not pressing too hard. When as we know, we want the free ranges, we don't want to press too hard. The harder we press, generally it's not as fine of a wine. Okay, and the AOC, the appellation, was established back in 1936. From the Guild of Sommeliers, you have all of the information that is, unless you are in this industry and asked a question like that, is probably about as, to say it's useless is very, very offensive, and I don't mean it that way, but by and large, it is very important stuff. But I mean, in terms of like going back to our point about like,
it's good to be in the app, so it doesn't have to be in your brain. But yes, and to answer Bruce your question about the wines here from the Maison Sanglier program are all made in France. So they're just harvested and made in a small winery there. That's part of our partnership with these vineyards we have there. So yeah, and then we shipping all over. We just got a new shipment of wines from 2019 and 2018 that just came in last week. So those will be coming here soon. So yeah.
Well,
Okay.
good, everybody.
Yeah.
Well, happy Sunday to y'all.
Mhm. Absolutely. And thank you so much, as always, for joining us for this. We've had a lot of fun. This was fun for me, for sure.
Yeah, y'all have a good one.
Thanks.